when I meet an entrepreneur and they failed, the thing that I'm trying to figure out is like, how did they fail? Is it, again, and this is going back to what we talked about earlier, did you just not listen and keep battering your head because you heard something or read something and you just, didn't refuse to pivot? That kind of stubbornness can be good, but it can also be extremely destructive. Did you fail because you got the market wrong, but you built a great product? That's actually not such a bad thing. That happens, right? Happens to the best of us. I mean, I failed more times and then the last thing is, are you comfortable with that failure? So the people that can own it, in my opinion, that's a very special class of person. And part of it is just being around enough people. That's why Silicon Valley is so great, because it celebrates failure as much as it celebrates success. And I think that's awesome. Like, I grew up in Canada. Mm-hmm. I love Canada. But what's frustrating about being Canadian is we don't celebrate failure.
Right.
And so it's all about mean reversion. It's all about managing the middle. And so if you're an outlier, you feel extremely isolated and you feel stupid when things don't go right, as opposed to trying to learn from it, rinse and repeat, try again.
Need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with Believe Nation.
Top 10, I got a top 10. Got my motivation high for my top 10. Gotta learn from the wise women and men. All my life, like na 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 na. For my top 10, top 10, na 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 na. This one's for my top 10. Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I make these videos because chances are you are the most ambitious person in your circle, but you know you're capable of more, and you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Chamath Palihapitiya, and my take on his top 10 rules for success. Enjoy. Rule number 2, be multifaceted.
We have a real responsibility to educate and teach people. But again, we need brands to do that, because nobody's going to listen to Buffett. Buffett doesn't have the energy to say what he said 30 and 40 years ago in 2021. And that's okay. He's earned the right to basically chill out and be the GOAT. But there has to be other folks that take that mantle and, take the baton and do it as well to this younger generation in language they understand. And look, to your point, that's why people say, like, who is this guy? Well, who I am is a byproduct of my generation and my media culture, which is faceted, not always great facets, but multifaceted. And so you have to speak in the language of the times in order to get your point across.
Rule number 3, build technical credibility.
You could be in, some small little town somewhere, and it could be you and 3 people who just have a really great technical idea. And if you can sort of explain that well, and if you can start to sort of, put out a beta version of a product and, be out there in the ecosystem and have credibility, I mean, like, you could raise money there. So to me, like, that's amazing. So if I was an entrepreneur that didn't know anybody, I would first try to go this path of angel list and try to build some technical credibility and product traction and use that as a conduit to sort of get introduced to people via that chain.
Rule number 4, get ground truth data.
Your instincts will always give you what is probably the right answer. But there's so many situations where it's just so incumbent on you to actually get some amount of ground truth data. And so I think, like, in hiring, a lot of times you react very viscerally to somebody. They can oftentimes be the right decision, but the idea that then you wouldn't, like, do backdoor reference checks on some person is, to me, insane, right? That's an example. Another example is, like, you build a product feature and it's like, I have this vision for what I want to build. It's this. And the product manager comes back and says, nah. And here are all these reasons why. And then you're like, no, look, let's just do it. This is what my gut says. And it's like, well, listen, here are all the implications for doing what you're saying we want to do. And then, you launch it and it's like a huge failure, and then you deprecate the whole thing. And what you've really done is burned out a bunch of goodwill amongst your engineers. That kind of stuff, to me, is, like, inexcusable. Whereas, like, you take that feature, you hack it together, you spec it out, you put it on usertesting.com, you get some feedback, you roll it out to 1%, and then you let the data tell you what you should do. Like, I think right now the problem is, like, in a lot of product building things, I think, like, people love this, like, martyr complex, where it's like, oh, I sat there and I divined this and it just came to me, and
I'm the visionary.
Honestly, it's a crock of horse. Great products are things that you have a reasonably good starting point that's mostly luck, and then you iterate very quickly because you look at how the dogs are eating the dog food. The first instantiation of that product may have been sheer genius. But don't fall for the ruse that all of a sudden the rest of it is that too. The rest of it is just blatant, profound professionalism and execution. That's it. And I think people should just be okay with that because it's all about winning. I think sometimes people celebrate the process too much and not the outcome. The outcome is the only thing that matters. If you are not winning, nothing else matters. And so pretending you're creating stuff and pretending you're creative, who cares? If there's a simpler way to win, get to winning. That is the only thing that matters.
Also, if you want to have more self-confidence and self-belief, the science says it can take up to 254 days of consecutive action for the habit to stick. That's what I want for you. So I've designed a custom, free program where I'm going to send you an unlisted video for the next 254 days to shift your confidence and belief forward. The link to join is in the description below.
We have a lot of heroes, but China movies, heroes always dead. The American movie hero never die. If all the heroes die, who want to be the hero?
Investing in yourself is the best thing you can do. Anything that improves your own talents. Like, nobody can take it away from me. They can run up huge deficits and the dollar can become worth far less. You can have all kinds of things happen.
The biggest risk you can take is not taking any risk.
Rule number 5, don't be afraid to fail.
I think in Canada, we're missing one really big thing, which is that, I say in my relationship with my wife, I joke with my friends, they're like, describe your relationship with your wife. And I say, often wrong, but never in doubt. And it's kind of like this half joke, which is really like, I'm like, blah, 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 blah. And then she has this look that says, and I'm usually wrong. And what's great is there's this safety where there aren't a lot of consequences for me being wrong. Silicon Valley works because there aren't consequences for being wrong. In fact, there's a celebration of wrongness more than there is a celebration of rightness. And I think that that is this one turn that Canada is missing. We somehow, and oftentimes too often, co-opt people into a very traditional mindset of performance. And we measure it in very typical and predictable ways. And as a result of that, we have these very brittle borders. So we don't allow the outliers to feel at home here. There is no reason why some of the companies that get started in Silicon Valley should have. There's as much reason in the world that many of the people, because when you look at those Silicon Valley companies, they're littered with Canadians. I mean, littered. I started recruiting from Waterloo in 2007 for Facebook. And it's like we recruit more people from here now than any place else. But so does Google, so does Apple, so does Uber, so does Square. Why is it the case that these great companies are built on the backbones of Canadian DNA and we all feel like we needed to leave in order to express our capability? And so if you take a step back, I think it's in the fundamental celebration of failure and creating the boundary conditions that tell us that it's okay to try things and not get it right.
Rule number 6, build a culture.
When you left Facebook, you wrote a pretty inspiring message that's on TechCrunch right now. And since then, you've gone on to invest and mentor many entrepreneurs and companies. As an investor, when you encounter a founder who has had past failures, do you view that as battle scars that make him stronger now? Or is it, proof that that founder doesn't have a good track record?
It depends. It depends on how they failed. I would say, I still believe everything I wrote in that departing note that I sent to the people at Facebook. I did I had a functional role, but part of my job at the end was probably to be this curmudgeonly old timer who made sure that we never kind of veered off of our Northern Star. Look, when companies work, the biggest thing that happens is you revert to the mean. And what I mean by that is the mean is every crappy company out there. And we all work at crappy companies. We've all done it. We all look at our boss and think, this guy's an idiot. How does he have this job? This company's so stupid. I hate my job.
Right.
Is it time to leave yet? We've all been in that position. And so the real question that I was asking myself at Facebook was, what happens and how do companies end up in this situation? And my realization is every company gets there eventually. But that last word is the most important. And so the challenge of a senior executive team is to prevent that regression to the mean. And culture is the only thing that does that. And so I would always speak to all of the people that we hired every Monday. And, part of it was to scare the living shit out of them, but part of it was to, be unapologetic about a culture that valued transparency, openness, authenticity, and value over perception. So it's not about politicking, it's not about managing up, it's about doing good stuff. And that the engineer that could be the most junior person has as much or more power than me. And that's an awesome dynamic, right? Because it allows the smart people who are capable to do the right things.
Rule number 7, hire someone with similar interests.
I like to believe that maybe you can hire for a role, but I really don't think so. I think you're basically just hiring a person, particularly at the earliest stages, who roughly agrees with you and is roughly on the same page and kind of cares about the same things you do. So that when the chips are down, they're not going to run away.
Rule number 8, incentivize.
It confounds me whenever I see great companies say, you know what, we are fabulous, we love our people, and then they pay at the 50th percent of a salary band. First of all, why do these salary surveys exist? And second of all, why would any great company not just say, I'm great, I pay at the 100% of the band. I pay at the 100% of the band, and then I expect 100% of the performance. So we go through all of these machinations that instead just allow us to bloat and bloat and bloat and bloat. Yet, when the things that are required to be done, the capital doesn't exist because it's already been misallocated. So if you create a mechanism where capitalism can come back, where you can merge the shareholder and the stakeholder, where employees and individuals are more incentivized to be actually truly innovative and create, you start to write the shit. And what's going to happen is a bunch of turbulent manifestations of frustration, aka populism, that then eventually calm itself down and it'll factor itself into policy. This is why these big companies will get regulated. They will absolutely get broken up. This is not 1999 Microsoft DOJ. This is basically the turn of the century Gilded Age, or this is, it's that kind of schism that we are probably embarking on.
Rule number 9, be a good decision maker.
I do want to have a Berkshire-like instrument that is all things, not to sound egotistical, but all things Chamath, all things social capital. Look, I was the one that backed up the truck in 2012 on Bitcoin. 2014 and 15 in Amazon, 2015 in Tesla. These SPACs are doing well. I can be a little judgmental at times, but I'm a good decision maker. And I think I know where the world's roughly going. And I want to translate that. I've made enough money for myself. It doesn't really float my boat. I do it as a demarcation of success and to keep the pressure on. But the best pressure for me was if I, was an instrument that retail, normal, ordinary folks could use to close the inequality gap for themselves.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is have values.
This is the one piece of advice I just have to say. I got this advice from someone that in your similar position, and I went back to the garage. This was in 2012, and I did just that, and I put my values on the website, and it fundamentally changed our trajectory. And
the first page of our website is our mission and values.
Yeah, and the first thing on the top.
No other venture firm even thinks about mission or values.
Yeah.
But that's our first thing, front and center. And we say, we're very unapologetic. This is what we stand by. This is how we are. If it's not for you, it's not for you, but it is for us. Yeah. And we're not going to change.
Now I've got a really special bonus clip that I think you're going to enjoy. But before that, it's time for the question of the day. I want to know, what was your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week? The science says that when you just watch a video, you get motivated, you get inspired, you have a 35% chance of following through on your goals. 35%! That's not enough! That's not enough just to get motivated. Believe Nation, we're here, you're here. Today matters, you're an action taker. When you commit to a plan of action of when and how you're going to follow through, When you write it down, you have a 91% chance of following through. And when you commit publicly to somebody else, it jumps to 95% chance. From 30-something% to 95% chance of you following through. Believe Nation, we need to make this happen. So question of the day, your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action specific for the next week. Put it down in the comments below, and I'm going to show on screen sometime next week to celebrate you.
We, as a whole societal species, have had this tendency to introduce inefficiency as technical innovation has gone down. So what big companies do is they absorb that inefficiency and promulgate it into the world. Why is it that in the last 30 or 40 years, the biggest advent in semiconductors and chips really has been Intel? Why is it that we still run on general purpose compute? You know, all the great fangled ideas that we may have about AI and this and that, and yet we still haven't invented a compute fabric that can compete with Intel or NVIDIA. I
started as a day trader effectively, meaning on the side I would speculate in my teens and in my 20s. An investor is not a speculator and it's not a day trader. And I think that a lot of retail, a lot of normal people, the only way they will close the inequality gap is because they take it upon themselves to learn how to become an investor. The government's not going to save them. No law is going to save them. No, taxation of the rich is going to save them. They can save themselves. And you have to learn how to invest, which is to put money into the things you care about and then do nothing. Well, maybe I can just give you an insight into how I process any opportunity.
Sure.
Random company comes in to the top of the funnel. Immediately, I'm making a very quick, hopefully it's a decision, but maybe sometimes it's a judgment. And I'm asking myself, does this fit into my worldview or not? Meaning, is it in my circle of competence? And I have a very simple way of looking at this. Is it going to fix something in inequality that I think is important, or is it going to fix something in climate change that I think is important? Those are the only two things I care about. Inequality and climate change. Under inequality, there's a bunch of stuff. Financial equality is important. Healthcare equality is important. Education equality is important. So it allows me to organize a lot of different opportunities. And I'm trying to figure out, is there a consumer proposition here that's important for them? Does it make something more symmetric? Does it take something that was asymmetric and fix it? So that's my first judgment, which is qualitative. That's why whenever I start my one-pagers, it's always, what is the strategy? And you can read all of these one-pagers now. And what you'll get away from them is the first lens is equality and or climate change. Then I start to do the fundamental work. And this is where I have a real issue with a lot of people who say that they're value investors. I think that I'm a value investor. The thing is that when you look up the word value in the dictionary, it doesn't mean cheap. It doesn't mean a cigar butt with 2 puffs left, that famous Buffett Munger quote. I think it actually means something that has value. And so then I'm really thinking about, what are the cash flows of this business? How does it create a moat, right? Meaning in software, some technological way that's hard for people to compete with it. And then can I get it for a price where there's a margin of safety, where if they misexecute for a quarter or if they have a little hiccup, it's going to be okay. Because, we've got an entry point where 5 or 10 years from now, this thing will be 5 to 10 times bigger. And that's how we think about all these things. And if you look at the deals that I've done, they kind of map pretty singularly one-to-one to that framework.
I actually am not that interested in a bunch of social good, to be honest with you. I'm interested in change. I'm basically convinced that people right now who are in positions of power are there for completely the wrong reasons and shouldn't be. Okay. And so the question is, well, how do you change the dynamics and the cycle of power and the balance of power? And in my opinion, when you empower individual people to make decisions, they tend to make more coherent decisions and they tend to make better decisions. And so when you look at a lot of sort of the problems that are ailing the United States or ailing the world, these are problems that bureaucracies have created. So, why is it that we all talk about how education is the most important thing in the world? And every politician to get elected has to have a position on education. But there's more than $1 trillion of student debt. It's the most encumbered sort of thing that an individual has to deal with. at the tail end of spending all of this money now, there's no guarantee of a job or any really meaningful employment. And then the worst thing is if you actually go bankrupt, that's the one thing that won't get expunged. And so you can see how like the system is sort of tilted against you. It's really great rhetoric, right? But all of these people have no incentive to actually change the system. And so from my perspective, I'm more interested in sort of creating a dynamic where actually people are empowered and can live kind of like, you know, lives where they are self-sufficient economically. They can do whatever they want. They can buy the things they need. They can have a great life. And if you look to these people who, again, we've put as false idols, they're just going to let you down. And they've let us down. And so I feel like technology and smart, you know, people can creatively solve these problems in ways that policy and other things can't. And so I just want to do that because I think it's the right thing to do.
You did grow up poor, is how you put it.
Welfare.
Tough situation.
Yeah, it was great.
How?
No, seriously, it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Well, so I mean, seriously, was it?
It was incredible. I mean, in the time, it was horrible.
Of course.
We lived above a laundromat in Ottawa, Ontario, in a little French ghetto called Vanier. But I went to a really good high school, Lisgar Collegiate. Every little rich muckety-muck went there. I didn't. And so I secretly hated all of them. But what it really was doing was lighting this unbelievable fire, this like nuclear reactor inside my stomach, where I'm just like, I am just going to win. And you know, it wasn't really until Waterloo where it started to really unlock. Again, particularly in these work terms where I was in the work environment, I'm like, I can crush. I just knew that I could do it. Yeah, so in hindsight, it was the best thing. Now, in part of it, why it was the best thing is I've now taken enough time to be introspective, to self-actualize, and to deal with it. But it came with immense amount of baggage. And you know, for a while, it was like I just needed to be rich because I was so poor. And then you get there, and then you're like, wow, this is really going to amplify either the best parts of my character or the absolute worst parts of your character. And there was probably a year where it was the worst parts of my character. But again, it's like, for me, it's been a journey of self-learning. And yeah, it was a hugely instrumental thing. Like I look at my children and I'm like, wow, like what boundary conditions could I possibly even remotely give them that will allow them to struggle in a way that makes them want to achieve great things? Mm-hmm. Your business strategy has to be fundamentally different. And what do I mean by that? If you are in the business of being a parasite on top of Google, your medium-term and long-term prospects are terrible. You're an impaired company. You don't know it. If you haven't figured out how to be unique, you're in a really tough situation. If you're a unique company that's increasingly become more competitive and similar to everybody else, you're running towards the Google buzzsaw versus away from it. And so, you know, travel is really interesting because it is one of the few canaries in the coal mine about what their true long-term business goals and strategy and real issues are. And you see it play out with, you know, TripAdvisor and Expedia. You know, some part of it is misexecution, as we talked about, some part of it, but it can be a bunch of things. But at the core of it is a decision that they will capture the overwhelming majority of profit in the travel sector. I mean, a lot of my life, quite honestly, is just copying things that I see. There's not a lot of original thought here. It truly is not. I mean, we can all pretend we're all geniuses. Honestly, be good copiers. Do you know what I'm saying? It's the best thing in the world. Like, be around high-functioning, high-quality people and just copy the that they do. Observe the that's, you know, kind of crappy, and then don't do that stuff. It's not a complicated formula.
When have you used that best?
No, all the time. I mean, look, now, it's funny. Like, it's like, you know, like, you have a surface area of ways to spend your time now, or I do. And, you know, I'm in this midst now where we're really scaling up what we're doing as a business. And I meet these people that to me are so iconic that they were sort of like arm's length people that are now sitting face to face, and they treat me like a quasi-peer. I wouldn't say a peer, but quasi-peer. But what I see is, I see some amazing stuff, and I see some utter dysfunction in some of the richest, most important people in the world. And I have to decide, how am I going to act? What am I going to embody? What am I copying? What am I not copying? And so I get a chance to now refine my decision making and discipline. And that's how it plays out. I don't know if I answered your question. So you could have the biggest, craziest, audacious idea in the world, but unless you can put one foot in front of the other and make that first step, you're screwed, and none of it matters. And again, all it does is it may allow you to, wrap yourself in some really elegant rhetoric. Maybe it allows you to, be really followed on Twitter and appear at tech conference. None of that matters. All of that crap washes out in the end. Because if you suck, you suck.
Right.
And you may be articulate, but if you suck, it don't matter. And you'll be revealed to be a sham. What matters there is, again, it's just that ability to understand what that first specific set of things need to be, with that broader, bigger goal in mind. But if you can't put your first foot in front of the other, and you know what's amazing? Most people can't, because they get wrapped up in the rhetoric of the vision and the mission and all of this, grandiose, blobbity-blying, that they screw up, and they're their own worst enemies. I like revolution, I like disruption,
right.
But I'm skeptical that things start that way. I think things, let's just say ultimately 5 years from now, we look back and we think that there was a massive sea change politically in the Arab world because of the Arab Spring. That fruit vendor self-immolated because he was frustrated. Now, maybe he started a revolution, but that took courage to do what he did. That's not right nor wrong, in my opinion. But my point is, that's an example of how a revolution started with, a small, or not a small thing, I mean, it was a big thing, but one thing that was tractable within him. And I think these broad-based kind of gnarly expressions of how all of these huge, crazy things can happen, they happen over many, 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 many years. These are massive tectonic plates. It all boils down to one person doing one thing. And I think that for a lot of people, that's hard still. That we are in this really huge secular transition away from degrees towards skills. It no longer matters where you went to school, what you did. Don't tell me you have an MBA. It's irrelevant. It's useless. Who gives a shit? Learn to code, and you'll be employed for the rest of your life. I lost a kid, 24-year-old kid, to a big company in Cupertino, where he got paid $175,000 a year and $600,000 guaranteed over 4 years in RSUs. And he's not done anything ever. Okay? So all of you should teach your kids how to code. All of you. You should learn how to code. But my point is, it's about skills now. And so that's another reallocation of trillions of dollars. I'm not afraid to be wrong. I just think being wrong is overrated in the North American philosophy. We really, look, there are certain times where you can't be wrong. If you're a pilot, you can't be wrong, right?
Or a surgeon.
I get that. Or if no, it's not true. Actually, surgeons make mistakes all the time. They leave, utensils or whatever, not utensils, but the things inside the people's bodies. I mean, but I get how certain professions need to value the sort of the binary distinction of right and wrong. But I think for most of us, it's really sort of you're either learning or you're not learning. And I think right now, we create too much of a God complex around being right. And we don't celebrate enough the fun process of iterating, and being able to be in the grind with people and laugh when things don't work, that it's not the end of the world. So I think to me, that's probably the single biggest thing that people have to get comfortable with, which is just you're learning. And you either care about that or you don't. If you're a good entrepreneur, we were talking about this in the green room, nobody should grow up to be an entrepreneur. I'm sorry, that's that's ridiculous. You should grow up to be really angry about something in your life that you want to fix or change to make better. You're not going to give up when something doesn't work, when something is wrong. You're just going to keep working at it because it's learning. But that mindset is only possible in that context. So I don't know, I just think that's a really important thing to really internalize. I think the most important thing that you can do right out of the box is define your values. And I see so many people who think it's such a glib thing when are asked to literally write them down what you stand for, they stand for nothing. And I think it's very difficult for you to be able to build something when you don't know your own true character. Because the way that that reflects itself, unfortunately, is you make a bunch of mistakes in hiring. And those people may be good at someplace else, but if they're not good for your company, then what you have are a bunch of disaffected people who don't understand, don't care the mission, and frankly will not go the extra mile. And it's extremely corrosive and destructive. And so I would say the single most important thing is just to literally write down, what are your core values? What do you believe unapologetically? And then don't bend them. And then when you're evaluating someone to work with you, do they really express those things and embody them? And more importantly, do you have a way of figuring out whether they do or not? And asking the questions that allow you to basically make those determinations. And when you get to an answer that doesn't really reflect your values, then do you have the courage to say no? And it's hard in the early stage because you're like, man, if this person says no, I have nobody else to work with, what is going on? And I've just seen it now so many times where we've kind of capitulated on that, and we've hired people into a bunch of our companies and they've all failed. And when we look back, systematically, the single biggest thing is they did not embody the values that we had.
You sometimes like to take on a more hands-on role with the companies that you work with, or is that normal of an investor or a VC to do?
I think it's probably atypical. I mean, that's sort of why we've constructed the space that we've constructed, which is to have a lot of these really interesting companies here very early on. And what it allows me to do is sort of transfer knowledge. I mean, look, right now, I've come out of sort of like, 12 years of operating some of the most interesting consumer businesses that have been built on the internet. And I've been a part of now 3 massively seminal, interesting products. Winamp, Aimon ICQ, Facebook. And so there's a body of knowledge there that's really relevant. But it's only relevant for a short period of time. 4 years from now, I'll be as dumb as any other VC. But in these next 3 or 4 years, I probably have some reasonable knowledge to transfer. And so the best thing that I can do is make sure I'm in a position to get that into as many people as possible. Because then at that point, what I'm hoping is then I'll be able to learn from them. Right. Because they'll really understand the rules of how the next 10 years will evolve. And then I'll be able to learn from them, and they'll feel, a sense of, not necessarily obligation, but like, that maybe hopefully a little bit of, gratitude combined with a little bit of, pity. And then they'll want to sort of, teach me.
If you want to see the top 10 I did on Kathy Woods, check out the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
In order to become an equity analyst at Jennison Associates, I was willing to buy into ideas that nobody wanted. I think it's a good thing for the ecosystem that